My name is Tina. I'm 30 years old. The smell of garlic and rosemary chicken filled my small apartment, a smell that used to mean home warmth celebration. But tonight it felt different, hollow, like I was rehearsing for a party no one had invited me to. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was my mother, Tina. I need to tell you something about this year's Christmas plans. I smiled automatically. Sure, Mom. What's up? Her tone was casual, too casual. Well, Rose's husband's family is coming over for the holidays this year, and we just don't have room for everyone. So unfortunately, you won't be staying for the actual celebration. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. Wait, what do you mean? It's just that there will be so many people, she continued. But don't worry, we still need you. Come early on the 24th, maybe around 7. You can cook all the food and set the table. Then come back on the 25th evening to help clean up. That way everything's organized. I stood frozen, the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the simmering pan. My mother had just uninvited me to Christmas, but hired me as the help instead. I didn't say a word. I just hung up. A few seconds later, a message from my sister Rose popped up. My kids are expecting nice gifts this year. Don't repeat last year's disaster with those cheap toys. The words blurred on the screen. Something inside me cracked. Not the loud, angry kind of break, but the quiet, final kind. The kind that tells you you've reached your limit. For years, I'd been their convenient extra pair of hands. Their chef, their babysitter, their backup wallet. But in that moment, standing alone in my kitchen, I realized they didn't see me as family, just as labor that didn't cost anything. I sat at my table, staring at the soft light from my tiny Christmas tree. I'd bought it secondhand years ago, when money was tight. The little ornaments were uneven, but they were mine. And for the first time, I saw the truth of it all. It had always been like this. When Rose and I were little, she got the new clothes, the ballet lessons, the summer camps. I got whatever was left over. When I asked for anything, I was told I was selfish. When she went to business school, they paid her full tuition. When I got accepted to culinary college, they said, "You'll manage." And I did. I worked mornings at a grocery store and nights waiting tables. Sometimes I'd come home and cry quietly into my pillow, exhausted, but too proud to ask for help. But they never noticed. Years later, when Rose got married and had 3 kids, my parents practically built a shrine to her achievements. "She's such a good mother," they'd say. Meanwhile, when I opened my own cafe, a cozy little Italian place I'd built from scratch, they barely acknowledged it. Just a cook, my father had once muttered, when a neighbor congratulated me. But just a cook was the reason Rose's family ate for free every weekend. Just a cook paid for her kids' birthday cakes, her emergencies, her endless borrows that never came back. I rubbed my temples and opened my laptop. Curiosity, or maybe self-punishment, made me pull up my bank statements. One by one, I highlighted every loan to Rose. 100 here, 200 there. Over 5 years, it added up to $30,000. 30,000. I laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief. How could I have let it go that far? How could I have been that naive? I thought back to every holiday dinner where I'd been in the kitchen while everyone else toasted wine every Christmas, where I'd wrapped gifts I couldn't afford just to keep the peace. They hadn't invited me to Christmas, but they'd still expected me to show up and serve them. I stared at the phone on the counter. The screen was still lit up with Rose's message, that little insult wrapped in entitlement. I took a deep breath and deleted it. The only sound in the apartment was the soft hum of the fridge and the quiet ticking of the wall clock. Outside, snow was starting to fall, blurring the city lights into soft halos. It hit me then, not sadness, not anger, but clarity. I didn't need to beg for a seat at their table anymore. I could build my own. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my planner, and began to write. Not a grocery list, not a menu, a plan. This year, they would finally see me not as their servant, not as their backup plan, but as someone who could walk away. Because I was done. Done cooking, done cleaning, done being invisible. I whispered it to myself as if sealing a promise. This Christmas, I cook for no one but me. The next morning, sunlight spilled across my counter, glinting off the half-empty glass of wine I'd left behind. My phone had 7 missed calls, 3 from Mom, 4 from Rose. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened my cafe at 9 sharp the way I always did. The smell of espresso and baked bread filled the air, but even the comforting sounds of plates and chatter couldn't quiet my thoughts. Between customers, I caught myself replaying years of memories like reruns of a show I'd seen too many times. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family birthday, I was the one in the kitchen, stirring, chopping. serving smiling. Tina, you make the best turkey, Mom would say. You don't mind doing the dishes right, Rose would add. I'd always said yes because that's what a good daughter did, a good sister. But the truth, I hadn't been part of those celebrations in years. I'd been working them. When I got home that night, I opened the folder where I'd been keeping all my bank receipts. I started tallying every favor I'd done for Rose since she had kids. There was the $200 for school supplies, the $350 for her daughter's dance recital outfits, the $500 for her son's tablet for homework. And then there were all the unpaid meals at my cafe. 5 years of free lunches, free dinners, free desserts for her kids every weekend, like clockwork. My calculator blinked back the number $30,000. $30,000 that had quietly slipped from my hands into hers, disguised as love. I leaned back in my chair, numb. Then a notification blinked on my screen, new email from Mom. Subject, Christmas menu and grocery list. Message, hi, sweetheart. Here's what we'll need for Christmas Eve. Turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, 2 pies, pasta salad, dessert platter. Also bring your serving trays. You always present food so beautifully. Love, Mom. I stared at the screen, feeling the air leave my lungs. She'd actually typed that with a heart emoji. I didn't even open the attached file labeled shoppinglist.pdf. I just dragged the email straight to trash. 15 minutes later, another notification popped up, a text from Rose. Don't forget my kids' presents. Oldest wants a new iPhone, the middle one a tablet, and the youngest wants the new gaming console. You can probably get discounts through your cafe supplier or something. My jaw locked. I could almost hear her smug tone. For a moment, I considered writing back something sharp, something final. But then I stopped. I didn't owe her anger. Anger was still engagement, and I was done engaging. I shut off my phone and looked around my apartment. The fridge hummed, the clock ticked. Outside, snow fell against the window in slow, silent flakes. I thought about the years I'd spent chasing approval, working through exhaustion, smiling through resentment, telling myself, if I just give a little more, maybe they'll finally see me. They never did. That night, I lit a single candle on my kitchen table and stared at the flame. It flickered unsteady at first, then steady and strong. For the first time in years, I let myself remember the moments that hurt the most. The day I graduated from culinary college, my parents hadn't even come. They said Rose's son had a soccer game. I'd walked across that stage holding my diploma, pretending the empty seat in the audience didn't matter. The week I opened my cafe, Rose stopped by, just long enough to hand me her kids' lunch orders. You can put it on my tab, she said, laughing. There was no tab. There never was. And the day I finally bought my apartment after years of saving and scraping Mom's first words weren't congratulations. They were. So now you can host Christmas, right? I used to think their lack of gratitude was normal. That family meant giving without expecting anything back. But now I realize that giving without boundaries wasn't love. It was servitude dressed up as loyalty. I pushed away from the table and went to my small living room. My reflection caught in the dark window a woman who'd built a life out of scraps, who'd been invisible in her own family. I thought of Mom's email, Rose's text, their tone that assumed I'd obey, and something inside me shifted. No yelling, no drama, just resolve. I'd still show up for Christmas, but this time not as their chef, not as their servant. I'd show up as me, the one they underestimated. And when I did, they'd finally understand what it meant when the cook stops cooking. December 24th. Snow fell in heavy, quiet sheets, blanketing the streets like a curtain. My phone started buzzing at 7 sharp, first Mom, then Rose, then Mom again. Each time the same thought crossed my mind. You still think I'll show up when you call. I let every call ring out. Instead, I brewed coffee, took a long shower, and dressed carefully. Cream sweater, dark jeans, gold earrings I'd bought years ago but never worn. I wasn't dressing for them. I was dressing for the version of me that had spent years in the kitchen, hair pulled back, hands smelling of garlic and lemon zest, always serving, never seen. By noon, I wrapped the 3 modest gifts I'd chosen for Rose's kids, board games, art supplies, books. Not the luxury electronics she demanded, but something thoughtful, something real. At 2 o'clock, I parked outside my parents' house. The driveway was crowded with cars, Rose's SUV, Dad's old truck, and a few I didn't recognize. Probably her husband's family. My stomach tightened, but I forced a calm smile as I stepped out, snow crunching beneath my boots. Through the window, I could see the living room glowing with decorations. Laughter spilled out when I opened the door. Rose was the first to spot me. She rushed over her face, pinched with irritation. "Why are the boxes so small?" she demanded, pointing at the gifts in my hands. "And where's the food? You didn't bring groceries." Before I could answer, Mom came bustling out from the kitchen, cheeks flushed, apron tied tight. "You were supposed to be here at 7. Now I'll never finish everything before the guests arrive." I set the gifts under the tree, brushed the snow from my sleeves, and calmly sat on the couch. "I'm not cooking," I said simply. For a moment, silence. Then, as if my words hadn't registered, Mom blinked. "What I said, I'm not cooking this year. I'm here to celebrate, just like everyone else." Their faces went pale. Rose's jaw dropped. Mom's voice cracked. "You can't be serious, Tina. We already told everyone dinner would be prepared by a professional chef. By you." I leaned back, crossed my legs. "Then you'll have to tell them your chef quit." "Don't joke around," Mom snapped, her voice trembling. "You're being childish. Childish." I met her gaze. "You told me I wasn't invited. You told me to come early to cook and leave before dinner. That's not childish, it's cruel." The air in the room thickened. Even the laughter from the other guests faded behind the closed doors. Rose's eyes flashed. "If you don't cook, you'll ruin Christmas for everyone." I smiled, slow and tired. Then maybe it's time Christmas ruined itself. For the first time, they didn't have a script to follow. They just stood there, my mother's lip quivering, Rose's fury rising. Finally, Mom slammed her hand on the counter. "We'll send you a bill for the food that goes to waste because of you." I reached into my purse, pulled out a folder, and opened it. "That's funny," I said, voice calm, "because I brought my bills too." I laid them neatly on the table, itemized catering invoices, grocery receipts, time logs, all printed and highlighted. For the past 5 years, I've cooked for every family holiday. If I charged half of what a caterer, would you owe me $8,000? That's with a family discount. Rose snatched the paper, scanning it with disbelief. Mom hovered over her shoulder, color draining from her face. "This is insane," Rose whispered. "Is it?" I replied softly. "You just said you'd send me a bill. Why not make things fair?" I pulled out the next sheet, bank statements, transfers, handwritten notes in the margins. "And here's the $30,000 you borrowed over the years. I added interest, but let's keep it simple. Just the principal will do." Rose froze, staring at the papers. "You kept track." "You bet I did," I said, meeting her eyes. "Because being your sister doesn't mean I'm your bank." Dad appeared in the doorway, voice booming. "Enough. It's Christmas, for God's sake." I turned to him. "Exactly. And all I ever wanted was a Christmas where I wasn't in the kitchen or footing the bill." For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the faint tick of the clock on the wall. Mom's eyes glistened with tears. "You've ruined our holiday." "No," I said, standing. "I just stopped letting you ruin mine." I grabbed my purse, walked to the door, and looked back one last time. "Merry Christmas. Enjoy your pizza." Then I stepped out into the snow. The cold air hit my face like a baptism. My hands were shaking, but my chest felt light-free even. By the time I reached my car, I could already hear voices rising inside the house. Anger, panic, denial. But I didn't care. For the first time in years, the noise didn't belong to me. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Through the frosted glass, their perfect Christmas lights blurred into a streak of gold fading behind me. I whispered to the empty car, let them feast on their silence. And for the first time in a long time, I felt full. I woke up the next morning to a stream of notifications lighting up my phone like fireworks. Dozens of texts, missed calls, and most disturbingly, a tag on Facebook. The post was from Rose. "Some people forget what family means. My own sister humiliated us on Christmas Eve, refused to cook after promising, and ruined dinner for everyone. Her selfishness made my kids cry. I hope she's proud." Below that, a photo of me sitting on their couch, arms crossed. Someone must have snapped it during the argument. The caption read, "Imagine acting like this on Christmas." For a few seconds, my chest burned with humiliation. Then I started reading the comments. Her friends, co-workers, even distant relatives, everyone chimed in. But it didn't go the way she expected. "Wait, you've been making her cook every Christmas. You said she's a chef. Doesn't she work full-time? Why would you expect that for free? Your husband earns 6 figures, right? Why are you making your sister pay for everything?" Rose tried to argue back, but each response dug her deeper. Within hours, the post had turned into a public autopsy of her entitlement. Someone even wrote, "If I were your sister, I'd have quit too." By noon, she deleted the post, but not before I'd taken screenshots. I set the phone down and exhaled. For the first time in a long while, the truth was visible, and I hadn't had to lift a finger to prove it. I poured myself coffee and looked around my apartment. The tree lights blinked lazily. The table from last night still held traces of my quiet dinner, a plate with roasted chicken bones, 2 half-burnt candles, and a half-empty bottle of wine. I should have felt lonely, but I didn't. There was peace in solitude, real peace, not the kind where you smile through exhaustion while everyone else clinks glasses. When my phone buzzed again, I didn't check. I didn't need to. I knew it would be Mom or Rose. Probably both. Instead, I opened my laptop and began typing. Not to them, to myself. A journal entry, a way to mark the shift. I used to think love meant saying yes, but sometimes love is finally saying no and meaning it. 2 months passed quietly after that night. No family dinners, no phone calls, no guilt, just silence. And in that silence, I healed. I poured more energy into my cafe. I laughed. With my employees, tested new recipes, changed the music, playlists, painted the walls a soft cream color. It was my space, my world, and for once it wasn't being taken from me. Then one morning in late February, as I was checking inventory, my phone chimed. A new email. From Mom, subject Dad's 60th birthday celebration. My stomach nodded before I even opened it. Hi, sweetheart. We've decided to celebrate your father's 60th birthday at home. Here's the list of dishes we'll need. Turkey ham, mashed potatoes, pasta, 3 desserts, and a fruit platter. Please confirm when you can come over to discuss the menu. Once you do this for us, we'll forgive you for ruining Christmas. Love, Mom. Forgive me. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. My fingers trembled, not with anger this time, but laughter. Small, incredulous laughter that bubbled up until I was laughing out loud in the middle of the cafe. Forgive me for ruining Christmas. They really believed I'd crawl back just because they dangled forgiveness like a prize. I clicked reply. Hi, Mom. Before I cook anything else, you'll need to settle the unpaid catering balance of $8,000 from the last 5 years. As for Dad's birthday, I'd be happy to cater professionally. My rate is $1,800 with a 50% deposit before I start. Let me know if you'd like to proceed. Best Tina. I hit send. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Mom's name lit up the screen. I ignored it. It rang again and again. On the 3rd try, I answered. Tina, have you lost your mind? She snapped, before I could say a word. This is your father's 60th birthday. You can't charge us money. Yes, I can, I said evenly. I'm a professional chef. You want my services, you pay for them. If you don't do this for us, you're not invited, she hissed. You won't even be allowed at your father's birthday. There it was again, the threat disguised as love. So I said, my voice calm, I'm only family when I'm working for free. Silence on the other end, then a frustrated exhale. You're being dramatic. No, Mom, I'm being fair. And then I hung up. For a long moment, I just stood there, the hum of the cafe's refrigerator filling the air. Then I did what I should have done years ago. I blocked her number, then Dad's, then Rose's. The screen went dark, and with it every tether they'd ever used to pull me back. That night, I sat on my couch watching the streetlights flicker against the falling snow. For once, my phone was silent. No guilt, no demands, no reminders. Just peace. But peace never lasts long when you stop being useful to people who only loved your usefulness. The next morning, someone started pounding on my door. I looked through the peephole and froze. Mom, Dad, Rose, all standing in the hallway. And none of them looked like they came to apologize. The pounding didn't stop. 3 sharp knocks a pause, then 3 more like a rhythm of accusation. I opened the door slowly, just enough for the winter air to slip in. My mother's face was red from crying. My father's jaw tight with irritation, and Rose, she just looked cornered. Guilty, but defensive. Tina, Mom began already pushing past me before I could speak. We need to talk. They all came in as if the place still belonged to them. My father closed the door behind him, sealing me inside, the air thick with unspoken blame. I crossed my arms, staying near the kitchen counter. I didn't invite you in. Mom's voice trembled. You humiliated us. You embarrassed your sister in front of her husband's family. Do you have any idea how hard that night was for us? I know exactly how hard it was, I said, keeping my tone even. For the first time in my life, you had to make dinner without me. My father glared. Watch your tone. No, Dad, I said quietly. For once you listen. Their surprise was almost comical. They weren't used to me raising my voice, not because I couldn't, but because I never dared. You've been using me for years, I continued. You made me your cook, your cleaner, your ATM. And every time I said yes, you took a little more. Mom's eyes welled up. Tina, we're family. We've all helped each other. When I snapped. When have you ever helped me? You paid Rose's tuition, her wedding, her vacations. I worked 2 jobs just to pay for culinary school. I bought my own apartment. I built my cafe from nothing. And you all treated me like an employee who owed you everything." Rose finally spoke, her voice trembling. "You're twisting things. You never said you had a problem, because I thought you'd notice without me having to beg," I said. "But you never did." The silence that followed was suffocating. Dad shifted uncomfortably, his voice softening. "Tina, enough. This is all in the past. You can't just, I cut him off, then pay me back." Mom blinked. "What?" "The $8 thousand dollars I'm owed for years of cooking and cleaning. The 30 grand Rose borrowed. Pay it back. Then maybe we can talk about the past." Rose turned pale. "You're really going to charge your own family?" "I already did," I said. "You just never took the bill seriously." For the first time, no one had a quick retort. My mother's lip trembled. My father's gaze dropped to the floor, and Rose's voice broke when she whispered, "I don't have that kind of money." "Then figure it out," I said, walking to the door. "That's what I had to do when you all left me on my own." They stood frozen as I held the door open. Mom finally whispered, "You're choosing money over family." "No," I said, my voice low. "I'm choosing respect over exploitation." They didn't argue after that. One by one, they stepped into the hallway. Mom turned back before leaving. "You'll regret this, Tina. You'll end up alone. Better alone," I said, "than surrounded by people who only show up when they're hungry." When the door shut behind them, the silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was clean. For the next few days, I felt strange. Not angry, not sad, just empty, like someone who had finally exhaled after holding her breath for too long. Then a week later, something unexpected happened. A notification popped up on my phone. Bank transfer received $8,000. Note from Mom and Dad. I froze, staring at the screen. They'd actually done it. They paid me back. I sat down at my cafe that afternoon, watching customers chat and laugh, wondering if this was their version of an apology. When I looked up, the bell above the door chimed. Mom, Dad, Rose. Her husband and the kids walked in cautious quiet. The children waved shyly. My staff froze mid-step, unsure what to do. I walked over to their table. "Menus?" I asked. Rose's husband smiled awkwardly. "We'd like to eat here if that's okay." "It's a restaurant," I said evenly. "That's what it's for." They ordered pasta, pizza, salad, the works. My staff served them while I kept my distance, pretending to focus on paperwork. I watched as they ate, as Rose glanced at me every few minutes, unsure of what to say. When the meal ended, they stood up. For a moment, I braced myself for them to leave without paying again. But Rose reached into her purse, took out her wallet, and placed her card on the table. "I'll get the bill," she said quietly. Her husband added a tip, 30%. When I came to collect the receipt, my mother reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "Can we talk after your shift?" I didn't answer immediately. I looked at her face, tired, softer than before. Then I nodded once. "After work." They left, and for a long time, I just stood there staring at the empty table. The dishes were clean, the bill was paid, and for the first time, maybe ever, I felt like the balance between us had shifted. That night when I got home, my phone rang again. Unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but something told me to pick up. Tina, Mom's voice said, quieter than I'd ever heard it, "Your father and I wanted to say we're sorry. Truly sorry. We know we took advantage of you. We know we hurt you." I sat down on the couch. "Why now?" "Because," she said softly, "we almost lost you." I didn't speak for a long time. I just listened to her breathing, to the silence that felt different this time, less demanding, more human. "I'll think about it," I finally said. "That's all I ask," she whispered. When the call ended, I leaned back and closed my eyes. Outside, the city lights shimmered in the distance. Inside, my phone was quiet. Maybe they meant it this time. Maybe they didn't. But at least now the terms were mine. Weeks passed. For the first time in years, my phone stayed silent, not from being blocked, but because no one was demanding anything from me. When it finally rang again, it wasn't about chores, money, or favors. It was my mother. "Just calling to see how your day was," she said softly. "That's all." That was new. At first, I waited for the hidden request, the small manipulative, by the way. That always came after. But it didn't. She just asked if my cafe was doing well, told me Dad had started going for morning walks, then said she loved me and hung up. It was so normal that it almost made me cry. A week later, my father texted me for the first time in months. "Proud of what you've built. Sorry I didn't say it sooner." Just that. No emojis, no long speech, just the truth, raw and awkward. But it was enough. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. I just stared at the message for a while, then tucked my phone back into my pocket and went back to kneading dough. Sometimes silence says more than words. Still, one piece of the puzzle remained. Rose. She hadn't called. Not once. Mom mentioned she was thinking things over, but I didn't believe it. I figured guilt wasn't enough to undo decades of entitlement. Then, one Saturday afternoon, just as I was locking up the cafe, there was a knock at the glass door. It was Rose. Alone. No husband, no kids. Just her wrapped in a coat that looked too thin for the cold. I hesitated, then unlocked the door. We're closed. I know, she said quietly. I just wanted to talk. She looked smaller, somehow, less polished, more real. She stepped inside and sat at one of the empty tables, fidgeting with her gloves. I didn't sit at first. I waited. I owe you an apology, she said finally. Her voice cracked. A real one. I leaned against the counter. Go ahead. She took a breath. I've been a terrible sister. I used you. I took your kindness and twisted it into something convenient. I borrowed money. I ate at your cafe for free. I made you cook for every holiday, and when you stood up for yourself, I acted like you were the villain. Her eyes were wet now. She didn't look up. Mom told me about the $8,000, I said quietly. They paid me back. I know, she whispered. I helped them. It's not enough. You're still owed 30. Her words landed like a stone in water, small, but with ripples that kept spreading. I don't expect forgiveness, she continued, but I do plan to pay you back. All of it. I frowned, uncertain. How? I started a repayment plan, she said, sliding a folded piece of paper across the table. $500 a month. You should see the first transfer tomorrow. I looked at the paper. It was an online transfer schedule. Real, organized, serious. For once, Rose wasn't just talking. Why now, I asked. She shrugged. Because I miss you. Because I don't want my kids growing up thinking it's okay to use people they love. Because you were right. Her honesty caught me off guard. She stood up, slipping her gloves back on. I know this doesn't fix anything overnight, but it's a start. I'll pay you back even if it takes years. She paused at the door, half turned. Also, if you ever decide to cook for the holidays again, I'll help. Or we'll hire someone. Either way, you won't be doing it alone. Then she left. That night, when I checked my bank account there, it was $500 transferred with a note. Payment 1 of 60. 60 months, 5 years. The same amount of time it took me to finally stand up for myself. I stared at the message for a long time, a strange warmth spreading through my chest. Things weren't perfect. They probably never would be. But something was shifting quietly, steadily, like the first cracks in ice before spring. Over the next few months, life softened. Mom called once a week just to chat. Dad stopped pretending everything had been fine and started saying I'm sorry without choking on the words. Rose began bringing her kids to the cafe again, but this time she paid. Sometimes she'd even slip me coffee when she came in a small peace offering wrapped in caffeine. And then one evening, Mom invited me to dinner. Just dinner, she promised. No cooking, no dishes, just come. When I arrived, the table was already set. The food, catered from a local restaurant, was still steaming in its containers. The lights were warm, the kids were laughing, and for once I didn't feel like an outsider in my own family. Mom smiled a little nervously. I wanted you to be able to relax for once. It was awkward at first. We didn't know how to exist without old roles to hide behind. But slowly conversation came, laughter, even small jokes. At one point, Rose's daughter leaned over and whispered, Aunt Tina, are you cooking next year? I smiled, only if everyone helps. Later, as I drove home, the city lights blurred through the windshield. My phone buzzed a notification from the bank. Another $500 from Rose. I laughed softly. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about change, effort, proof that they finally saw me. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked at my reflection in the window, calm, steady enough. Maybe forgiveness isn't a single moment. Maybe it's a quiet decision you remake every day to keep your boundaries, to stay open but never small again. For the first time, my family wasn't asking what I could give them. They were giving back. And for the first time, I felt like we were building something real on respect, not guilt. Because this time, I wasn't their cook. I wasn't their wallet. I was their equal. And they finally saw it.